Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Another 2 hours of KBS lies before you. That's right, I am Kev Baker. You are in the right place at the right time for today's show. Skype is working brilliantly again. The stars have aligned for some reason, and it is bizarre when Skype works brilliantly, folks, let me assure you. As a regular user, it's possibly one of the most inept programs there is. But all that aside, thank you for hanging on with me last night while we were having the issues at the start of the show. And we're going to make up for it big time today. Because it's my birthday today, right? 43 years old, 16th of July, that special day. And I thought to myself, I'm just going to self-indulge a little and get into one of these topics, or some of these topics that I really, really love to get into. And that date in itself, the 16th of July, very, very significant, in particular this year, because it coincides with a very special anniversary from all of your very favourite space agency. That's right, folks, NASA. They're celebrating today. Apollo 11 took off on that very infamous mission back in the day. Some people maintain they never went. Some people say they did. And who knows, but what if I was to tell you both of those happened? Potentially, that could very well be the case. We live in a multiverse, ladies and gentlemen, with parallel realities that go on and on and on. And everything that's in this dimension exists in other dimensions with just little changes here and there. And talking of changes, it's changes we're going to be getting into tonight. Because something's going on, and it's been going on for some time now, and it's a topic I've addressed in the past very much in depth. And I moved away from it because I still couldn't make sense of what is going on. And then recently I was sent a video from a gentleman talking about Mandela Effects, and this video really stood out for me because there's probably tens of thousands of people talking about Mandela Effects over on YouTube. And trust me, I've probably seen half of them. And then I watched this video from a man called Chris Anatra. And what made this video stand out from all of the rest, aside from the great production quality, was the fact that in my mind, this was the first time that a company and its CEO were addressing the Mandela Effect. Now, for me, that is very, very pivotal indeed. And Mandela Effect's still controversial. Some people roll their eyes, and that's okay. That's fine. And as I've said before, if we think of Mandela Effects in a similar light to déjà vu, we never mock anyone who experiences déjà vu, and we should never mock anyone having Mandela Effects. So to get into this tonight, to find out how his company ended up at the centre of all of this Mandela madness, I have got Chris Anatra live on the show. Chris, welcome to the show, sir. And again, thank you so much for agreeing to come on to talk to me and my audience. That's like a special treat for my birthday, man.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here for sure.
So, Chris, before we get into the obvious elephant in the living room here, I mean, talk to us a little bit about yourself, about your company. Who are you, and what's NECS?
NECS is a company that I founded way back in the late 80s that specializes in a particular line of computer software for food distribution. So it's very, very specialized. In fact, if you don't distribute food, you'd probably have no interest in our software. So, and people always ask me, Chris, how did you get involved with food distribution? And my answer is always, since I was a baby, I've always been around food. So it was a natural thing to get into the food distribution. But it's all my company does. And we have a large base of clients, mostly in North America, that use our software. And it's something that they use for their operations day in and day out, from the moment they start up 3 or 4 in the morning They start loading the trucks to make their deliveries, and then they have salespeople going to restaurants, etc., with their iPads taking orders, and customers are transmitting their orders via their mobile phones, like the restaurants, etc. And the trucks get routed, and deliveries get made, and commerce basically happens. So a lot of people don't realize it, but a lot of the food that's delivered in the United States, one way or another, kind of passes through our software, because so many smaller to mid-sized distributors will use the platform that we created.
Wow, no, I didn't have any idea, and I apologize. I didn't realize just how significant your company really was there. Now, like I was saying, you felt compelled lately to come to YouTube to talk about something that perhaps many's a CEO in the tech world has recognized, has picked up on, but maybe hasn't had the courage to come forward. And I say that because there's a risk when talking about Mandela effects and the mainstream science's view that this is almost like pseudoscience. And that's another reason your video, and when you were talking about this, it really stood out for me. Like I said to you before the show, it almost adds another layer of credibility, because it's one thing Joe blogs saying that he remembers the name of a book one way and somebody else remembers the name of a book another way. But when you're working with pure data, raw data, and that in itself is causing problems for you, your clients, your programmers, that's another ballgame altogether, sir.
Yeah, exactly. And it's hard to quantify it, because a lot of the times, when customers would call in, it would always go back to, well, they just had a bad memory. They thought it should be this, and we were able to prove that it wasn't. So these are the kind of things it's hard to quantify. And then just the whole food service, for whatever reason, food has been somewhat popular with these Mandela effects. As far as changing the names of products, a lot of times there's things related to product brands and logos, and it's easy to dismiss because, oh, they just redid their logo, or their brand must have just changed, et cetera. Or I thought they did this, or I thought they did that, and now they don't do that anymore. And I could have sworn that was in my system. So yeah, it's kind of amplified because food and Mandela seem to have gone together for some reason.
I wonder about that, Chris. I wonder about that because we were saying before the show that these changes that are occurring at the very start, you can look at the books, and obviously this was coined. The phrase Mandela Effects was coined because people remember Nelson Mandela dying back in the 90s, but he didn't die until 2013, okay? So there's that's why it got the name Mandela Effect. Now, actually kind of forgot where I was going there because somebody rudely interrupted me and messaged me on here, Chris. But when it comes to things like names of books and foods, then the ripples, the ramifications of changes to that happening, I can imagine they're not very consequential in the big picture of the universe. However, just recently we've started to see other effects taking place. Like I was telling you, and we'll get into later on in the show, where now we're looking at historical events that are actually happening, that are being changed. And it feels to me as if we've almost moved from one phase into another, or something's getting worse. Because to start with, they weren't all that. They were quite innocent, if we look at it that way.
Yeah, you know what? And it's also, besides historical things, it's also involving the children now. So I'll give you an example. I made a video actually about this at my house over the weekend, but I've got 4 kids. Two of them are younger boys. One is a 7-year-old, the other one is a 10-year-old, and they're big into Pokemon, right? No, I don't know a lot about Pokemon, to be honest with you. I do know the main character is named Pikachu, but there was a Mandela effect that's hit the kids about Pikachu's tail, the tip of the tail no longer being black anymore. And my kids were pretty upset about that. So it's crossing all these different layers and boundaries. It's not just my generation or people from the 20s up. It's like now it's starting to affect the younger kids too, and they're confused about it and concerned about it. So and if they go online, they're told that it was always that way and they're just misremembering it. But they're like, no, I know Pikachu had a black tail. Like I know his tail was black. So I think it's really notable that it's starting to cross all these different boundaries and layers of the population.
Absolutely. Now, because you work in the food industry, in your video, you rattled off a few foods. Now, a few of them, they translated across the pond here, you know, with the same kind of things. Some of them didn't. And one of my friends in Canada, she had a real problem with the one that is called Stouffer's Stovetop Stuffing, because she absolutely remembers that, and as do millions. So, Chris, if you just give the listeners a quick example, perhaps they've not seen your video, if you just let them know some of the changes that you've noticed occurring.
Yeah, see, the Stouffer's Stovetop Stuffing is a big one because, well, in my office, when these things started to become obvious to me about a year or so ago, for our weekly Monday staff meetings, I kind of, at the end, I changed them to just ask people about the latest, 2 or 3 Mandela effects. So it became known as Mandela Mondays. Like, what's Chris going to talk about next? And sometimes, the room would be divided, sometimes 50-50, sometimes 70-30. But the Stouffer's one got everybody. Like, everyone remembers Stouffer's Stovetop Stuffing, like beyond a doubt. I remember seeing it in the store, everything about it. So when they talk about the Mandela effect being like a mass misremembering of an event, that's pretty weird that, millions of people remember this. It's also kind of a bizarrely named product, right? Stouffer's Stovetop Stuffing. You wouldn't just come up with that on your own.
What's even more bizarre, Chris, is you type it into Google and it's there. I mean, it auto types it, it fills it out for you. It recognizes the search term. You go into it and it's craft stovetop.
Yeah, exactly. And in my software, which is interesting, we have these different, because a lot of the customer base that we have all these controls in it to track who does what, who went into the inventory file or the customer file record and made a change and gave them a certain percentage off of a certain product or blah, blah, blah. One of the things we check for is to see when a description changes. And which user changed the description and what was it before? What did they change it to? So we were finding discrepancies with Haas avocados, for example. It was like an internal war. Who kept changing the Haas to the Haas? And, people would go back and forth within a company doing that. Same thing with Stouffer's, but Stouffer's actually changed, the brand actually changed to Kraft. So it's really, really interesting about how all this is working. But I think the main thing is just giving attention to something that's happening. And even if you're a naysayer, like even if you're like, oh, these are just crazy people, there's so many of these things that are happening. It's going to come to a certain point where you just can't deny it anymore. Like, seriously, there's so many different things.
That happened to a lot of us recently when I was explaining to you that the Lusitania, commonly accepted as the event that led America into World War I. It's now been trumped, pardon the pun, by what has happened on Black Tom Island in 1916. 2 German agents infiltrated an ammunition depot, and no wonder you're looking at me funny, Chris, because I don't remember it either. And yet, they say until this day, or until the 90s, I'd need to check again, but nobody was ever allowed into the flame on the Statue of Liberty because of damage done in that explosion. Yet people remember going into the flame. There's pictures of people in the flame. So it's really weird, dude. Really, really weird. So in your research, when you were away from work, in between Mandela Mondays, and I'd love to work in your office, by the way, and I'm really keen to get your take on this because you literally work with data, raw data. And everything in the universe is made up of data. So here you are, right at the center of it. Where did your research take you?
Well, you know what? When the whole the phenomena started with me with the Mandela effect that I didn't understand. And it was the year was 2013. And I was reading to one of my boys, guess what nighttime book? The Berenstain Bears, right? And we had like 20 of them on the shelf. So I pulled one of them out to read to him, and it said Berenstain Bears. And I'm like, whoa, somebody misprinted the copy, the title of the book. I don't know why I didn't catch that before. And then I happened to notice it was referencing Berenstain throughout the book. And I'm like, what? And then I took all the other books off the shelf, and it was like Berenstain, Berenstain, Berenstain. I'm like, what? But at that time, my company was in the midst of this big software release, and we were also redesigning our website. There was all this stuff going on at the same time. So the only thing I thought of, honestly, was that somebody broke into my house and stole all of my good Berenstain Bears books and replaced them with Berenstain Bears. I couldn't come up with any other solution. Like, that was the only thing that I could think of. So my point is, that was my first kind of exposure to that. And then, 2 or 3 years passed and really nothing happened. And then reports were accumulating from customers that we couldn't really put our finger on. Like, data, they thought data would be one way and it wasn't quite that way. And, we'd always show that it was the correct way. Or if there was a software bug, we have no problem saying, hey, there was a bug in that report in this particular version. That wasn't the case. So, yeah, so for me, it actually started with a Mandela effect, but I didn't even realize, I didn't know what that was. Like, I had I just thought I don't know what was going on, honestly, but I just put it on the shelf until more things started to accumulate. And then these other things, started to affect my business, my company. And then I started experiencing more Mandela effects myself. And here I am now.
Absolutely amazing. Here we all are. And I was talking to you before the show about my theories about the multiverse, etc., stuff like that, probably in a simulation, perhaps. And we can talk about that in a moment. But one character that comes up often in the conversation when it comes to Mandela effects and the machine that he created, and something that you mentioned in your video as well, is Geordie Rose and the D-Wave. Now, as somebody that works with technology, somebody that's passionate about technology, I would imagine. I think your company are into new technologies as well. What do you make of Geordie Rose, and what do you make of the whole quantum computer? And before you answer, I find this quite a good synchronicity, because quantum computers, they do a lot of optimization. And the ultimate optimization kind of experiment or equation in mathematics is the traveling salesman. And it's all about distribution in the most effective manner. And I find that almost quite laughable, because here's you, a software developer that makes distribution software. And here we are now talking about quantum computers. So take it away, man. What do you make of it?
Well, I know just for application in my business, like one of the things that my customers deal with is the routing situation, routing their trucks, for example. And there's all kinds of things that come up with truck routing. It's not as simple as you would think it is. And a lot of these advanced truck routing systems are very, very expensive, and they're not really that perfect all the time. But a quantum computer could do things with truck routing algorithms that can pretty much guarantee a good route every day, and the most efficient route. So there's a lot of real world, really interesting applications that are going to come as a result of quantum computers. And D-Wave is just one company, right? They pioneered it for sure. IBM, I believe, has a quantum computer, or they're about to release it.
Yeah, I think they've got something. They were working with 8. I think they're aiming for 51 qubits, something like that. And okay. I often tell people, don't try and make D-Wave and these other companies compete, because it's a different mechanics that they're actually utilizing. D-Wave tunnels to parallel realities, and what the IBM and Google are doing is they're making gate quantum computers. It's just a different way of accessing the same thing, but it sounds like a lot less powerful. But in reality, who knows? Because once you access these other dimensions, Chris, well, multiple worlds are your oyster, right?
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if you could just peer into other realities and just see what's going on there, seeing what's successful and what's not successful. because so many of these parallel realities are very, very, very similar to ours, like very, very similar. It's just, I think it goes with how they just split off and they fracture out. So yeah, so how these realities work in our holographic universe, how these quantum computers are tying into them, it's kind of still part of my journey of things that I'm learning about. And is it that quantum computer itself that causes something to happen, or is it the algorithms that are produced and how the software that's produced by them to actually go in and be able to, however it's done, access that information by using, I believe the regular computers use silicon, and I believe at least the D waves use an element called iodium, which was I believe discovered in Connecticut, where I'm based actually, and it's a rare element. I think they mine it in Brazil and maybe another part of the planet, maybe Africa, someplace that's a very rare element, but it can exist in those multiple states at once when it gets super chilled down to the close to absolute zero that it has to be to function. But I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but I don't think that I don't know if it's D-Wave specifically, or it's the software, or something else, or D-Wave is a clue that's going to lead us. These quantum computers are a clue that's going to lead us to another way that these things are being accessed and utilized.
Yeah, I think we're just getting so technologically advanced now that we're really starting to open up the nature of reality. We're just starting to learn. And I went and re-listened to what Geordie Rose said today when I had him on the show about this very topic. And it was quite interesting because he doesn't call them dimensions, it's parallel realities. He says they're very real. He talks about them in a physical sense and on a quantum level. He says what we're doing is we're manipulating / fusing the realities, and then they get the answers that they want. Because in his famous talk in 2013, he said the qubit, which is different from your classical bit, which is a 1 or a 0, the qubit is a 1 and a 0 at the same time. And if it's a 0 here, then it's going to be a 1 in the other reality. Now, that might be the only difference between that reality and ours. And I like to think of them almost stacked like pages, Chris. And I could be wrong here, I'm just speculating. But they almost create shadows above and shadows below. And that's the ones that we are, as he says, manipulating and fusing with. Now, he also says that what we're talking about in terms of reality, the more we're starting to learn is things are looking like a simulation. And I don't want people to balk at that and get outraged thinking I'm not in a game. I don't mean like that. I'm talking about the most advanced simulation ever. It's real. Everything's real. However, everything, like I said, is made up of information. And what Geordie says is we're dealing with now the properties of information in this dimension and the next, or this reality and the next one. And I wonder if that fusing, Chris, that manipulating, going through the veil, tunneling, whatever term you want to put on it, is having an effect on some of the data from the past. And even when he talks about the past, it's quite strange because he says, does the past even exist? Can we access that data and retrieve it if, say, Chris had a cup of coffee 2 years ago? Can we go back and look at that? Can we retrieve that data? So he kind of dodged Mandela, but then talked about manipulating data in the past, whether we could do it. I don't know, dude. I think there might be a connection. I don't think he's deliberately set out to create a machine that's done this. Maybe it's just a consequence of the technology we've got.
Yeah, exactly. And who's to say that there is a parallel reality where they've came across a cure to some disease, and if there's some way we could access that and bring that into our reality? Like those are the really positive types of applications I can see for this.
And already, I mean, I often cite the fact that using quantum computers, if you take a picture of somebody's skin, if they're developing skin cancer, in studies, you're talking about 6 months ahead of when humans would spot it, Chris. mean, that could be life-saving. So already we're seeing how it can definitely move us forward. And I try to take the fear out of AI as best I can, because we've been programmed really since birth by Hollywood that it's going to be a bad thing, it's going to take over the world, we'll end up like Terminator. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure that potential's there, but we can get into this on the other side, and we can talk more about the quantum mechanics, more about this kind of stuff with Chris Anatra. Now, Chris, tell people where they can keep up to date. We'll get it on the other side. We'll be right back. Our number two, well, no, second part of the show, ladies and gentlemen, or is it? Maybe in the other reality, it is already our number two. What are you doing to me, Chris? You know, we have got Chris Anatra here.
It's not me, it's D-Wave.
It's D-Wave, yeah. I'm sorry, Geordie. I'll make it up to you, man. But no, in all serious, folks, I'm joined today by a very special guest on my birthday. We've got Chris Anatra here, and he is the founder and president of a software food distribution company, or software for food distribution companies, and it is called NECS.com. I urge you to check it out. And if you're just tuning in, Chris really shot to prominence over on YouTube lately when he made a video talking about the Mandela Effect and how it's impacting his clients and his business. Before the break, we were really geeking out, and all we can really do in this realm is speculate, because neither myself or Chris are claiming to have any of the answers here. We're all just trying to make sense of one of the most mysterious problems I've ever come across in my time doing this. And we often talk about simulation theory, Chris, and I just want to, if I may, read a quick part from David Icke's book. Now, people will start thinking, David Icke's book? Surely not reptilians. But no, that's a stigma, folks, because Icke really gets into the simulation theory, and he quotes other scientists out there. And I talk about the simulation a lot, and information in particular. And get a load of this. It says, James Gates is an American theoretical physicist and professor of physics at the University of Maryland, director of the Center for String and Particle Theory, and served on the Council of Advisors on Science and Technology to President Obama. He's another mainstreamer who has turned his attention to reality as a simulation. Gates and his team of researchers discovered embedded computer codes on digital data in the fabric of our reality, which take the form of ones and zeros. These are the very binary system of on-on electrical charges used by computers. And he said, we have no idea what they are doing there. They are there because the codes, and this is back to Ike speaking now, they are there because the codes of they are the codes of the simulation. And the team also found mathematical sequences which are similar to error-correcting codes or block codes within the energetic fabric of our reality. And these, again, are a feature of computers. Error-correcting codes reboot data to its original state or default settings when something forces or threatens to disrupt the standing wave scalar field construct. Gates was asked if he had found a set of equations embedded in our reality indistinguishable from those that drive search engines and browsers. He replied to that, correct. So, Chris, this whole simulation theory thing, it was first talked about, I think, back in the early 1900s. But now we're starting to open up the science that almost looks like it's starting to prove it.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think even just taking it from a logical, rational point of view, it becomes the only solution, actually. It really does. And for me, being a software guy, that's how I have to look at things, impartially, neutrally. I think there's a lot to be said there.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we can look around nature and it's wondrous. It's brilliant. Some say divine, and it is. You've got the Fibonacci sequence, everything. Maths, you can take it out into the cosmos. You find the similar mathematical patterns. Now, as somebody that works in programming and coding, Chris, it isn't the only other place in the world that you find such perfect math and rules, like the laws of physics and reality. You've got sets of rules that things obey. It's very much like writing a computer program, right?
It really is. And when you're writing code, if you make even a small mistake, you put a comma someplace where you should have had a space and your code doesn't execute, and you get a syntax error, whatever the error is, it's because you've gone outside the boundaries of what has been defined for how it should operate properly. So you begin to learn pretty quickly what the rules are, how to become efficient in what you do, etc. So yeah, the coding becomes something that as a programmer, you depend on that code to run a certain way all the time, without a doubt.
Absolutely. It all comes with parameters, there's rules like the speed of light here and the way everything works, and just similar to how computers work as well.
So you got the quantum layer, and then you've got the reality rules that we experience above the quantum layer. Yeah.
Absolutely, dude. Yeah, I couldn't agree. And it's very layered, like pages in the book or even like layers in an onion.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's one thing, millions of us talking about them here, there, and everywhere, but it's almost as if all of this kind of stuff, simulation theory, nature of reality, Mandela's, woo, as I like to call it, it's in popular culture as well. And we see other dimensions in the hit show Stranger Things. We see particle accelerators and quantum computers turning up everywhere. And you were telling me, sir, you went to see a movie that's going to become required homework for anyone into this kind of topic, right?
Yeah. So the movie I took the family to last night was called Yesterday. So last night I took them to see Yesterday.
That ties in with tonight's topic, right?
But it's really interesting because the premise of the movie, and I'll say it without giving anything away, because if you watch the preview, you'll figure this out pretty fast. But it's about a person that basically wakes up in a timeline where the music group, the Beatles, never existed. So he's a musician. He knows the Beatles music pretty well. He can't remember all the lyrics sometimes. So part of the movie is him trying to remember the words to Eleanor Rigby or whatever it is, those complicated songs they did. But basically, it's all about timelines. And he begins to discover that not only did the Beatles never exist, but every time he asks for a Coke, people think he wants cocaine because only Pepsi was around in that time. Like Coca-Cola never existed. So those type of things. But it was interesting because in the movie, it really only dealt with things not being there. So what we're experiencing are new things or changes to things that we knew to be true. This movie shows things in a different type of way where things don't exist, which is interesting. And when you watch the beginning of the movie, you'll see what instigated it was a solar flare. And I believe that somehow solar activity, we're going to come to learn these different things, but there are these trigger events, whether it's from the sun versus quantum computers or CERN or whatever's going into the mix. I somehow think the sun is involved. And it was really interesting how the movie touched on that at the beginning. But it was a pretty cool movie. It was a fun movie. It was a love story at the same time. So again, it's just like more soft disclosure. Like, how much soft disclosure does there have to be? Like, Avengers Endgame, Doctor Strange picking the best timeline out of, 14 million, and all these like you mentioned, and all these other Netflix and Amazon series like Man in the High Castle, where a timeline where the Nazis won World War II.
An amazing show. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so many. There's so many.
And like, especially, Stranger Things, the connection there with the Department of Energy and the fact that they're the ones that have opened up this rift, blah, blah, not giving anything away for anyone who hasn't watched it or anything. But then you find out in the real world, the head of the Department of Energy actually goes on to a show and says, well, actually, we are working in other dimensions. And if you do a little bit of digging, you find out they're one of the companies that have a quantum computer. So it is. It's all starting to make its way out, whether it's purposely, whether it's leaking out, whether this is just we are where we are on the timeline of where we're going, Chris. You know, maybe we just start to learn more every time we go forward. But I like what you say about the sun as well, and I find the sun very interesting indeed. We'll not get into climate change or anything like that here, but I think the sun is the biggest game in our solar system, obviously, and I also think it ties in with an electrical universe. As opposed to the gravity model, and I'm not rubbishing gravity, I'm just saying that there's this electromagnetic component to everything, right down to us ourselves. We've got electrical circuits in us. We're made of mainly water, which is a perfect conductor for electricity. The planet creates electricity. So even that in itself ties in with some kind of constructed simulation. And even when we say simulation, Chris, I don't think our brains, as good as they are really able to comprehend what all of this is. You know, the most similar thing is a simulation.
Yeah. And just from when you were talking too, one of the things is all that I also think is tied into all this that we're going to figure out in the near future has to do with our mitochondria that are in all the cells of our body, especially packed in our brain and our heart muscle, et cetera. The mitochondria, like they generate the power, the electricity for our bodies. And if we didn't have them, we just wouldn't exist, obviously. So there are like all these like layers to things as to how they operate that are all like super, super important.
Absolutely, dude. And I think you, if I remember correctly, you mentioned our DNA in your video, and they're made up of code, and they're like hyperdimensional antennas. And we're always getting bombarded with some kind of energies from the sun, from space, from here, there, and everywhere. And we really don't know what kind of long term effects this is having on us. And these things can change. I mean, we've only here for a blink of an eye, and we're only becoming this technologically advanced now, and it's speeding up all the time. So who honestly knows what we're going to uncover 5, 10 years down the road that will make more sense of the things we're starting to pick up on now?
Exactly, exactly. There's going to be a lot of things that come together. I know in the upcoming years that are going to start to make more sense of what's going on in our holographic universe, in if you want to call it a simulation or even a game. I don't want to cheapen it by saying that, but
yeah, I know what you mean. I feel the same way there. That's why I'm hesitant even to call it a simulation because it makes people feel like I'm kind of rubbishing their lives. It's not real, and it's very real. Our problems are very real, you know?
yeah, and just because like we're just discovering these things now doesn't mean the quantum, world hasn't been there for millions and millions and millions and millions of years and beyond that actually. So we're just becoming aware of something that's already in existence, and I think we're going to discover so much, so much we have no idea about, and just the drama that's out there, the interesting, the intrigue, the stories, the this faction versus that faction, and this collective versus this, and all of these things coming together. And then what are we doing here in these bodies and having this experience? I think all these things are going to eventually, we're going to become enlightened to what's going on. So we know how to navigate this world. We're not operating here blindly. You're born, you think you just popped into existence, and then when you die, you just disappear. Like, I don't think that's the way it really works. So I think these things are going to all become more and more apparent to all of us, especially as we're ready to comprehend it. So step number one is the nature of reality, right? So if you can't wrap your head around a holographic universe type concept, it's hard to get to the next layer.
Absolutely, dude. Now, I started the show by saying it's the 50th anniversary of the launch for Apollo 11 today. Now, you were also telling me on Facebook today, very significant, synchronistic as well, and we love synchronicity on the Truth Frequency, but you noticed something about the whole moon landing thing as well, right?
Do I know something about it?
No, you mentioned something today on Facebook when you messaged me.
About the Eagle?
Yes.
Yeah. So big day for NASA, right? The 50th anniversary of the Apollo moon mission. It's kind of overshadowing your birthday, so I apologize for that on
Good.
behalf of NASA.
43. Who wants to remember their birthday after like 25, dude? Come on.
Yes. So I was just thinking there is a new mandanimal that's crept into my reality. It's something called a harpy eagle. And it's notable to me because I know when the lunar craft landed, they said the eagle has landed. So to me, I just got this new eagle that's really kind of a strange looking creature. I have never seen this before. And one of the things I always tell people is that somebody must open a mandanimal zoo of all these like crazy animals that, sorry, I've never heard of, like I forget what it's something called the Mangalista pig, which is a pig that grows wool.
What? No, hang on. Now, this is what I was really keen to ask you, and I'm glad you've reminded me, right? But mandanimals, that for a start, you need to trademark that. That's brilliant. You know, that is absolutely brilliant. But talk to me more about this, Chris, because, like I said, I moved away from the topic. I had to because it have me too confused, and I'm getting ready for shows, and I dedicate each day to each guest. I give them equal time. So talk to me about these mandanimals.
Oh my God, there's so many of them. One is this pig. It starts with an M, Mangalista or something like that. But it's a pig that grows wool, so you can get a wool coat from it, and bacon. Hey, that's quite the pig.
Oh, hang on a minute. Now, I'm looking at these on the internet right now, and I will send a picture to the chat room over at tfrlive.com/chat. I'm sorry for laughing, Chris, but this is, what the heck am I looking at, dude?
I know, it's crazy. So the harpy eagle came in. One of my first mandanimals was something called a shoebill, which looks like a prehistoric dinosaur / bird to me. It's definitely in the bird family. They've had them in the San Diego Zoo for a long time, and I've been to the San Diego Zoo. I never saw them in my reality, but there's so many of these animals that have crept in that. And I used to watch nature shows a lot. Like probably more than I should have. So I know a lot of obscure animals, but these are some pretty obscure things that have come in.
I mean, as a man that comes from the Highlands of Scotland, and as the network often jokes, you know, I know my sheep, and I have never seen anything that looks like this Mangalista pig. Oh, dude, you have sent me down the wrong rabbit hole or sheep hole or whatever we're in now, man. Honestly, man. I mean, what other changes have you come across, Chris?
Oh my God, there's so many. Besides animals, I mean, there's so many different changes. I should probably have a list for what all the animals this zoo should contain. But one of the coolest Mandela effects for me is people that have violet eyes. It's something called Alexandria's genesis. It's considered a genetic mutation where your eyes are violet. And Elizabeth Taylor, I always thought she had blue eyes, but I guess she had violet eyes, and she even had a perfume called Violet Eyes. But to me, like violet eyes are like really strikingly beautiful and very unique. And I've never seen, besides pictures, I've never seen or heard of anyone that had this Alexandria's genesis. And the way the story goes, it was something that happened related to Alexandria, Egypt. There was a flash in the sky, and people.
No, man, I've never seen anyone like this. I mean, you know, there's a big joke running about right now about storming Area 51. You've probably heard about it, Chris, right? But I tell you, people, that's where I would expect to find people with eyes like this. And I'm looking at Elizabeth Taylor here as well. And yeah, I never appreciated she had like violently purple eyes, you know?
I know. So these are really, really interesting things. In fact, one of the things too that I've mentioned before is Gilligan's Island. Okay, I used to watch it all the time as a kid. I was probably watching it in the late 70s, to be honest with you. But I watched all the seasons. I kind of knew them all by heart. I know what they all look like, right? Now, you know, so Gilligan now wears a tan hat, and he has these striking green eyes. And just for fun, I bought like the season 1, which was black and white, and then season 2 of Gilligan's Island, which is the first one they did in color. And I was shocked because Marianne now has green eyes. I thought she was wearing contact lenses. Ginger always kind of had greenish eyes. The skipper had bluish green eyes. Mrs. Howell has green eyes. The professor has green eyes. The only one that doesn't have green eyes now is the millionaire. And then I found doing some research that the Gilligan's Island Mandela effect connects into another Mandela effect for a lot of people, which is the JFK assassination. So what happened was when they were filming season 1 of Gilligan's Island, the opening scene where the SS Minnow is leaving the port, all of the flags are at half-mast because the day before, guess who was assassinated? JFK was assassinated the day before, but they were still intent for whatever reason on filming that opening scene. So to me, it kind of connected Mandela effects.
Yeah. That's quite interesting,
So,
actually, when you find ones that have these ripple effects. And I think that's another shocking one to the whole World War One and Black Tom Island, the way that it has ramifications up until present day with the Statue of Liberty. And even where the Statue of Liberty sits is now quite contentious because is it Ellis Island or Liberty Island for you?
well, you know what? I don't know what this Liberty Island is. Besides, it's an island that's popped up into this reality.
There you go.
Ever since now, Sicily is 1.9 miles from the Italian coast.
And it wasn't until I seen your video that I'm with you. I'm from your timeline, or we've got the same memory because South America was never stuck out like a sore thumb from North America.
Yeah. So it goes to show you that it's everything. It's history, it's geography, it's pop culture, it's art, it's personal things. I experience personal Mandela effects from time to time. That kind of like what is that? Like there is this, when I drive to work every day, there is something that appeared in my reality of, there is this older house that has like one of those plaques on it about, was built in 1892 or something. Now on the side of the house, there's this big yellow sundial clock. And I'm like, whoa, did they just put that up? And I drive past this for the last 20 years. I've never seen this, never seen it. And so I had my son with me one time and I had him get out of the car and ask the person that lived there, how long has that been there? And the person said, oh, it's been there for a long time. He didn't give the year or anything, but my son wasn't being that inquisitive. But I'm like, all right, a long time is not yesterday. So yeah, so these things can be big, they can be small, they can be customers' data. It's there. It's all over the place.
I was speaking to somebody recently, and I don't want to give the name away or anything because I'm not sure if they've kind of gone public with this yet. But like you say, geographical locations, driving down streets and things being there that used to be there, or things gone that used to be there, entire places just removed, new places popping up. It's so strange, man.
Yeah, and even the issue with time itself.
Yes.
Sometimes time is like goes by super fast. Like it was 9 o'clock and now it's 11:30. Like what? How did that happen? Like it just, time went by, but not that much time. Or every once in a while, it seems like time really slows down, and you somehow get a little bit more time added to your day. That's a bonus. So yeah, all these different things are all being affected. They all play in somehow.
And I get you, dude. I agree with you. I mean, I know we all perceive time differently anyway. Doing something tedious, it's going to take an hour's a long time. Doing something you love, quick time. But I'm with you, it's more enhanced. There's something extra to it now. And I know people say, well, you're just getting old, Kev and Chris. No, it's more than that because younger people are even experiencing this as well. So it's strange times, but the most interesting of times as well. It's quite quantum, right?
It is. And I think all these things are happening on purpose. Like I think this is timing that was, I'm going to say it's not random. I think on some level, what's happening to us now, well, first of all, I think the Mandela effect has kind of always been there.
Yeah.
It's always, but now it's accelerating and becoming more obvious. And now we can talk to each other. and compare notes, where in the past it would have been a little bit more difficult to do that. So the timing is definitely really, really good.
Absolutely fantastic, Chris. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, man. I don't know if you want to hang on for 5-10 minutes after the break, because my co-host is going to be coming on to the show, and his wife recently had an episode with time. I'll let him explain it, but I would really appreciate if you could hang out just to talk to
Sure.
Joe briefly. But again, if you let people know where they can find your work, because you wrote a blog about the Mandela as well on your website for the company, NECS. Let people know where to go, man.
Yeah, so we can provide a link, but primarily you can go to necs.com. My latest blog or article gives a synopsis of what the video was about. I actually did the blog first and then did the video second. And there's a link to the video there. You can also find the YouTube channel that I created. It's called NECS Entree Software. It's all like one word, and it'll be probably the first video you see there. There'll be a lot of other boring videos you won't want to watch. I'm actually doing something, because doing this video, I got like 1,000 subscribers. Before, I think I had 26.
That's awesome, dude. I tell you, your first 1,000 is the hardest 1,000, man.
Yeah, so now, like for the things I want to talk about, it's not really company appropriate. It's more getting into the quantum, and as I'm discover new things and put new pieces together, I want to create videos, etc. So I'm going to be changing the channel.
We'll be back just after the break. Don't go anywhere, folks. Now it's our number 2. See, I remembered this time, folks. Thank you all for tuning in to today's Kev Baker show. Moving into the second hour of the show now, Joe Joseph has joined us.
And for the record, might I add that second, I wasn't responsible for that derailment, and I certainly do apologize for the first one, dude. I do. It was not intentional, but I was losing my ever-loving shite.
It was. I'd been planning this perfect show in my head all day, and then I get started.
Oh.
The binging's going off on my Skype. There's messages flying on my phone. And of course, all of this because we're joined by Chris Anatra. Now, Joe, we watched this video together on a live stream. Me, you, Scott, and we were blown away by somebody with a software
and we were
company.
Kids in a candy store.
Yeah.
Be real.
I'm going to give it to you, man, because I don't want to take up too much of Chris's time. And I know you were brimming with questions and stuff to say to Chris. So over to you, man.
Well, like I said, in real life, Chris, like I said, we've noticed anomalies, but then, at home, one thing, my wife is a spiritual lightning rod is the best way I can describe it. And she oftentimes experiences things that many people do not. And I've witnessed some pretty unbelievable crap in the 15 years that we've been married. And October 26th, I think, was no different, because that night, she basically, my recollection of the whole event was she wakes up screaming, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? And my daughters run in the room, where she remembers it that my daughters ran in the room, and then she comes over to kind of hit me to say, wake up, because I was sleeping next to her, and I'm not there. I'm gone. Just gone. But even though I was just there, and it freaked her out so much that she screamed, because I was supposed to be right there. Where the hell am I? She screamed. But the whole reason why the girls ran in was because she had screamed, and they slept in two different bedrooms. So it was kind of like it was a massive time slip where she was experiencing things like 10 seconds ahead. It was unbelievable. And it just happened. I don't know. And it only affected her. It didn't affect us, but it affected her. But we all witnessed it. I don't know how else to explain it, but it was as Mandela time slippy as you can possibly get. I mean, time was like in flux for a good 10 seconds or so, out of order.
So you were in bed, then out of the bed, then back in the bed?
Well, I got out of bed because the girls came in right? So I went to go put them back to bed.
Oh, okay.
See, but that's why I was out of the bed. But when she reached over, I was already gone, even though I was in the bed. That's what's so screwed up is like she had warped herself like 10 seconds into the future and was experiencing things 10 seconds. My girls were in the room and they came in as a result of her screaming, but that was before her scream.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, man, it was crazy. I mean, my wife to this day she's still struggling with it, almost like PTSD from the whole thing, because she can't make sense of it in her head.
Yeah, one of the things I've been finding is that people that have, let's say, we'll call them spiritual gifts,
Yeah.
think they're just more tapped into the quantum world. And I think it has to do with left brain, right brain synchronization. And there are all these factors involved, but I think your wife is an example of someone that has gifts. And
Yeah. Oh, no doubt.
yeah. So
No doubt. But that's a good way of looking at it, because if there's one thing, when I started doing this, I started out with a very spiritual heavy slant on things. And then Kev came around and Kev brought the quantum into that. And I brought the spiritual, and we kind of met in the middle, and we figured out that, holy moly, look at this. Spirituality and science don't compete. They complement. It's unbelievable, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So because of that, it gives us kind of a unique perspective and understanding in all of this, is that the two are pivotal to each other's existence. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's going to be in the mix of all these things as we become more knowledgeable about what's going in is something called the Akashic Records. Okay. To me, I didn't even know what the Akashic Records were till like 2 years ago. I never heard of them before. And if anyone's watching this and they're not familiar with it, the best way I can describe it is it's almost like if you play a simulation game and you want to watch, I don't know, like the last 10 minutes before you die or something, you can do a replay and watch those events as they've happened. The Akashic Records are kind of similar to that. It's a way of tapping into past lives and other events, etc. It's very, spiritual. If you're a quantum scientist, you don't really talk about the Akashic Records, but I think that's going to be like another key to understanding all these things as well. There's a lot of layers here for sure.
Yeah, I almost think like that's a name, a kind of label we've put on this quantum realm where all of the information that ever was, is, and ever will be does exist. And you can call it the Akashic Records, you can call it a quantum field, but it's definitely out there. And again, it takes us back to how everything is made of information. And it's this manipulation of the information at quantum levels, opening up microscopic portals to these other realities. And then earlier on in the show, Chris, I forgot to ask you at the time, but you mentioned the fact that in the D wave they use, is it idiom or iodium?
Yeah, iodium.
Yeah, well, just recently as well, there's another metal that they use in the D wave, and it's niobium. And then you've got CERN, who during their last upgrade, they souped up the magnets. Now they went up to a niobium magnet. And when you look at CERN, very similar, in fact, to what they're doing at D-Wave, because the qubits at D-Wave are tiny little loops, and the charge goes both ways at once. So then if you think of that on the quantum level, and then take it up to the macro scale, you've got a 17-mile radius version of that at CERN. Because what have you got there? You've got charges moving counter directions, and then smashing into each other, to, what do the scientists say? Open portals to other dimensions. So you're literally looking at a giant quantum computer, a giant qubit in reality. I wonder how much that plays into it.
Yeah, I know that when I from the research I've been doing on, related to CERN is I almost think of them as like an electric fence. So like I've got these two Rhodesian Ridgeback dogs, and they pretty much keep them under control by having an electric fence around my property. Mostly, though, if they get motivated, they'll get shocked and go through it. But for the most part, I think CERN almost acts as an electric fence around our reality to keep us inside and make it so that the Schumann resonance doesn't spike and do all kinds of wonderful things to our human DNA, etc. So,
You know,
there's
that's
all kinds of
interesting.
things going
That's
on with CERN,
interesting
for sure.
because myself and Joe, do you remember when we've talked about the magnetic field on the Earth acting erratically?
Yeah. When they fire off CERN, when CERN fires up,
even apart from that, we've talked about the fact that perhaps, you know, this could be used
perhaps
as a
substitute.
Yeah, a backup. And that sounds very much like what Chris is saying here. You know, you can picture
Yeah, well, because think about it. If you're facing an extinction level event because of the magnetic shield of the planet dropping due to a pole reversal or whatever phenomenon is occurring, whatever is causing it, and it appears to be the cyclical regeneration of the magnetic field, that it could very well just be a stopgap to cover the planet should, you know, the shields drop. And it's very likely it will, based on other events that have happened in the past that there's a record for, you know.
Are you thinking that CERN is there for our protection? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying one thing that I've come to find out when they utilize technology like this or scalar or anything like that is that there's multiple uses for the technology, meaning that, you know, of course, it's a very dynamic machine. It's not a one-track. You don't have a one-track mind with that. So there's probably multiple uses. And one of the things that I've seen is the power of the thing is exponentially more powerful than the magnetic field of the planet. And every time they fire that thing off, the magnetic shield looks like somebody that sticks a fork in an electric socket. Those magnetic lines of flux just go woo everywhere, right? Mm-hmm. So my thing is we're looking at a 10% reduction in strength in the next 5 years in the magnetic field of the Earth, and it's weakening fast. They're saying within 50 years. Some people are saying within 50 years, you're not going to be able to go outside because just the cosmic rays and the solar radiation that's going to be affecting you. So with that said, could that also be the case that maybe this is something that they could adapt or make into a makeshift shield? Because like I said, it seems that's just one component of it. You could look at many different components of it. I also look at it as could be a Stargate. Is it any coincidence that they built it on the site of Apollyon's temple? You know?
That's yeah. Ooh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Dedicated to Apollo, like did you say?
Yeah.
Mission, because Apollo's on my mind today. Obviously.
Is it really? Well, yes. Let me. I shall bring it up for you while Kev. I'm going to bring up Apollyon's temple.
Yeah, it's built on the site of that, and the one thing I found interesting about CERN when I was looking into it as well, Chris, is that statue of Shiva out in the grounds as well. You know, the destroyer and the creator of worlds. That's a bit weird thing to have sitting out in the grounds of somewhere where they're doing a science experiment. You know,
pretty telling and pretty obscure. Why that?
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay. Let's see if I can find. I got 10 mind-blowing facts about CERN that you need to know. So first, CERN is the world's biggest machine. Of course, $9 billion that's a big 17-mile circuit, so it costs a lot of money. It's big. It's got massive gravitational pull, comprised of 9,600 supermagnets, which are 100,000 times more powerful than the gravitational pull of the Earth, that fire protons around a circular tract at mind-boggling speeds. A beam might rotate for up to 10 hours, traveling a distance of more than 10 billion kilometers, enough to make it to the far reaches of our solar system and back again, traveling just below light speed. No less amazing are the magnetic coils, made up of 36 twists, 15-millimeter strands. Each strand is comprised of 6,000 to 9,000 single filaments, each filament possessing a diameter as small as 7 micrometers. The 27-kilometer length of the LHC demands some 4,100 miles of cable. That's which amounts to 145,000 miles of strand. So that's pretty interesting. I'm trying to get to this. CERN extreme temperatures, 100,000 times the temperature at the center of the sun. So that's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Opening doors to other dimensions. Yeah, we know that. CERN's curious. Yes. Now, on top of all the speculation as to what CERN scientists are really attempting to do with the Large Hadron Collider, many observers couldn't help but point out that the town of France, where CERN is partially situated, is called Saint Genus Pouilly. The name Pouilly, I'm sorry. The name Pouilly comes from the Latin Apolliacum, and it's believed that in Roman times a temple existed in honor of Apollo, and the people who lived there believe that is a gateway to the underworld. And it's interesting to note that CERN is built on that exact same spot. Yes. So there you go.
That's fascinating.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's weird, eh? Strange times, man.
Strange times, but I'm pretty sure one way or another we're going to start figuring out answers to these things.
Absolutely, man.
Sure. Yeah.
Now, before I let you go then, Chris, any last things you want to say to the audience out there? I'll give you another chance to give your YouTube a shout out. And what I'll do for you is I'll put your channel on my recommended channels page as well. So anyone looking for it, they can go and find it there as well, okay?
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to say is that because I was able to, I went from 26 subscribers to over 1,000. Yay! For my business, I'm actually going to be like moving my business videos, etc., to another channel for my company's use, because I want to expand more. And I'm going to rename the channel that it's on now, which is NECS Entree Software. I'm going to call it Multidimensional Man. Which is going to be the basis for what I talk about how we're all multidimensional, etc.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so look for, if you subscribe now, you'll automatically be moved over when that's ready. And I just made another video that I'm going to start to edit, probably post it next week. And I got a couple more planned, and I think it'll be like interesting, the things that I'm putting together in a certain format that I don't think anyone's quite connected the dots the way I want to connect them. And it'll be cool if you watch and see how things develop. But all these things we're talking about with CERN and time travel and this, and we didn't talk about time travel, but
next time. Next time. You see, this is what I do, Chris.
Yeah, see, that's it. Yeah,
I always purposely, I purposely leave something out, and then that way I can say, Chris, maybe you could come back and talk about that. So next time we can get into the multi-dimensional man and time travel.
But yeah, hopefully I'll have something to talk about, but I'm sure by then, yes.
Perfect, sir. Perfect. And tomorrow you're appearing on a show. Let people know about that.
Yeah, so tomorrow I'm going to be on a show called the Jimmy Church Show. I know my time, it's later at night for me. It's like a 10:30, but I think on the West Coast it's probably 7:30. But yeah, so I'm going to be on the Jimmy Church Show tomorrow. So yay for that.
That is awesome, Chris, and let me thank you for being so gracious, taking an extra bit of time out of your day to speak to my crazy friend, Joe. So thank you very much, sir, and thank you for coming on and explaining all about how you and your company got into this world, and I hope we can work together again in the future on here, maybe get together for a live stream over on YouTube. Anything you need, man, we'll be here for you.
Cool, so good. It was so awesome to talk to you. So awesome. Thank you.
Nice
to meet you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.